So yeah, afternoon everyone. This will probably be a bit different, bit of a pace change what we've had so far. So my name's Tom Robinson and I work in plant health. Um, so we enforce and implement the plant health policy in England and in Wales on behalf of the Welsh Government, and we report to DEFRA. So the industry that this presentation will focus on is UK viticulture, which is the growing of grapevines, and how we developed a surveillance programme within this trade sector. So to make this happen, as I'm sure you can appreciate, there's been lots of moving parts over the last year or so, which has been a huge piece of work. So it's hard to cram all of this into the 15 minutes. I've tried to keep this fairly big picture. I won't go into too much detail. So if there's anything that you want more clarification on, do please ask at the end. So I'll start with a bit of industry background. So UK viticulture as an industry has undergone notable growth. It's been gaining recognition both domestically and internationally, which is mainly attributed to the expansion of vineyards across the UK. Vineyard owners are capitalised on unique terroir, which is basically a culmination of factors: microclimate, soil, minerality aspect, the amount of sun they get that contributes to a site's terroir, which influences the final product, which is the grapes, which makes the wine. None of that's scientifically proven, but it's some of the romanticism that comes with the industry. So despite the challenges posed by the UK's cooler climate, vineyard owners and winemakers are implementing effective strategies to overcome them. There's a strong emphasis on implementing biosecurity measures to protect vineyards from pests and diseases. So the viticulture industry carries the scars of phylloxera from the 19th and 20th centuries. This is a soil-borne insect which is native to North America, and it almost wipes out European viticulture altogether during this time period. So therefore, as an industry, it's very privy to the consequences of getting kind of biosecurity wrong. So the industry in the UK is incredibly young. Obviously, you've had kind of monks growing vines in the UK for hundreds, maybe thousands of years, but the first fully commercial vineyard was only planted about 60 years ago. And today we have nearly 1,000 vineyards, individual vineyards. So this is obviously rapid expansion. So currently the UK has around 4,000 hectares under vine, but an area the size of about 35,000 hectares has been identified as suitable for vineyards by the University of East Anglia and Vinescapes. So we're only at the tip of the iceberg, really, as to what is to come down the line. The average size of vineyards has increased by 100%. There's about 2.2 hectares in 1993, and now it's about 4.5 hectares on average. That was in 2020. And in this year alone, 400 hectares of vine have been planted. So the vast majority of vines that come into the country and are planted are propagated on the continent. So therefore, nearly all of them are imported. And this issue is further compounded from a biosecurity perspective, as nearly all of them will be brought in a bare root dormant state over winter, so no symptoms could be seen when they do come in. And we discussed earlier, about 400 hectares have gone in this year. On average, they plant around 3,000 plants per hectare, so that's about 1.2 million plants that have come in this year alone. So vineyards are popping up closer and closer together, and obviously more and more vines being imported, so the risk of quarantine pest and disease spreading amongst the industry is obviously going up and getting greater and greater. So we've discussed the industry background and why surveillance is important from that perspective, but now we'll turn our mind to the driving force behind this shift, which is regulation. So before leaving the EU, smarter rules for safer food regulations, SRSF regulations came into force, which we then adopted into our plant health legislation post EU exit. And a requirement of this legislation was to perform annual surveillance for GB priority and multi-annual surveillance for every other pest and disease listed in Schedule 1, 2 and 3 of the plant health regs. So surveillance is therefore, it's now a tool used to categorically prove the absence of pest and disease listed in the legislation, as well as provide an early detection opportunity within England and Wales, as that's the scope of AFA. The key to this mentality shift is a requirement to move away from using the phrase not known to occur towards known not to occur. So it's just shifting 2 words around within the plant health regs, but it's generated a lot of work. So in practical terms, this now means that we're shifting away from a traditional pathway and risk-driven approach and working to incorporate the trades, species and premises that we think could possibly be at risk from kind of the known unknowns that lie within the legislation. So it's no longer deemed adequate to simply state that the quarantine pest and disease have never been recorded. We must now kind of actively prove that they're absent from the UK through surveys and surveillance. So in the broad picture, there's over 20 priority GB pests and diseases and over 180 multi-annual pests and diseases. So yeah, near enough 200. So obviously we can't run a separate survey for each and every pest and disease. So we collaborated with DEFRA scientists and risk analysts. So they researched and categorized each pest and disease by industry and kind of sector. So this has allowed us to take a location-based approach where kind of the pest and diseases that are deemed highest risk and most likely to be detected. So we run surveys in orchards, soft fruit, cereals, potato crops, all kinds of different aspects. And obviously vineyards is a new one for us as an agency. And so every inspection performed and recorded will be used to generate reports that will provide evidence that will allow us to maintain our current import regulations. So every inspection that we do that has a negative output, we don't find anything that has absolute value as it's used to prove the absence of the pest or disease. So what are we looking for? So this is what we're looking for as part of the Vineyard survey. So multi-pronged. This multi-pronged location-based approach is great for efficiency, but it also has a lot of limitations when it comes to kind of survey design. So survey design is always filled with compromise in practice. It's impossible to optimize the survey for every single pest and disease that we have listed here. But you can see we've got the risk ratings on the right-hand side, and we've tried to optimize the survey towards the pest and disease that have the highest weighted risk rating. So most modelling to date has been on single pests. So Alex gave an excellent talk yesterday about survey optimization for, was it Hanglongbing? The reality is that due to resource pressures...
Yeah, it's just I don't know how to input it with the 5 samples.
I think so.
Oh, sorry, can you go on mute, please?
Yeah, so yeah, he gave a great talk about survey optimization yesterday, but the reality is that due to resource pressures, the surveillance we can actually deliver is on complex multi-host, multi-pest systems. So this might not be a perfect approach, but it's what we've got. It's what we had to get started, so it's what we're working with. So having said that, we tried to optimize our approach by designing inspection windows. So this is when the diseases are most likely to be detectable. So this is June through to October. And we kind of profile the work through that time period. So, so if a disease or a pest is most likely to be detected in June or September, as we're going through each month, we're doing the same amount of inspections. So you're not going to get all the inspections in September or June. So you're not going to miss a particular window of pest.
Like that. Yeah.
But how this kind of affects the statistical modelling is kind of up to debate. But there we go, we can do what we can do. So another hurdle, obviously, is there's a diverse range of epidemiology across the pests and diseases here. So we've got to employ a large range of kind of inspection techniques to get around that. So this is the first kind of time that we've tried to implement statistically based surveillance. And I'll kind of briefly run through the parameters of it now. So the target population, we use Vitis plants at commercial vineyards. For the epidemiological unit, we chose to go with kind of a single field on a single vineyard site. There were a few variables that we could have gone for here. We could have gone for hectarage, but we chose not to go with that just due to the pragmatism and practicalities of trying to implement that. With a risk-based approach, kind of as I've mentioned, this is new to us as an agency, so we opted not to incorporate kind of risk factors because we wanted to get a better handle on the industry and learn to understand it a bit more before identifying them. So through consultation with the trade and applying kind of general risk-based principles, we've now identified a couple of risk factors which we'll hope to implement in the future. And so these are kind of the use of propagating materials such as rootstocks, scions, proximity to vineyard hotspots, so areas such as the southeast that have a higher proportion of land under vine obviously represent a higher risk than, say, a single isolated vineyard in a valley in Derbyshire, which would be a pest and disease island. The proximity of vineyards to locations where Vitis species are stored, traded, planted, or distributed, and kind of sites that use lots of different contractors that frequently visit other vineyards. So the aim will be, as I said, to try and incorporate them down the line. So the detection methodology that we've used, we've took a stratified random approach. So we do indirect inspection, looking for the symptoms on the previous slide that would indicate the presence of the quarantine pest and disease. And we do this on 20% of the crop. And across that 20%, we target 300 plants evenly distributed specifically and inspect them in detail. And this gives them a 95% chance of detecting a 1% infection actually on the site. And this is in line with EFSA and international plant health standards. We also take latent samples for Xylella, and we sweep net the field perimeter for insect vectors. So to calculate the design prevalence and confidence, we use the EFSA risk-based estimate of system sensitivity tool, or the RIBUS tool, which I believe is the same tool that the animal health guys or world uses. So this is the point for us where kind of theoretical survey design and practical implementation part ways. In an ideal world, we could sit down, pick a confidence level and pick a prevalence level, and it would, you know, spit out a number of sites to sample, and we would be able to do that. But from a resource perspective, this just isn't possible. So we kind of have to reverse engineer this. We have to sit down, figure out how many sites we can realistically visit, and then work backwards. So in doing that, we managed to come up with an output. The survey gives us a 90% confidence to detect a 4.5% prevalence, which is a lot higher than we'd like it to be, but we can only do what we can do within the confines of our resources. But the silver lining to this is that we now have something that's quantifiable, so that we can compare it to the kind of gold standard, which helps to kind of frame the resourcing conversations. But the issues we've found with RIBUS, it is calculating the risk factors. So how do we quantify that one risk factor is twice as risky as another, or 3 times as risky? That's a bit of a shot in the dark. And also determining the method sensitivity. So how good are our inspectors in the field actually finding the pest and disease, and the laboratory diagnostics? How does all of that compound to come up with a final figure for method sensitivity? So obviously it's a new industry, it's a new work area. We need to provide training and resources to inspectors, so they felt confident to step into this kind of viticultural world. So as an agency, I think we've got around 400 staff members now. Not all of these will be doing surveillance and action work, but a good chunk of them are, you know, maybe 100, 150, maybe even more than that. And obviously we couldn't turn up to a vineyard with an army to go through it. So we came up with kind of a train the trainer day. And like, fortunately, by this point in the survey journey, I'd made some pretty good contacts in the industry. So I had a vineyard in the north and a vineyard in the south, and they agreed to host a kind of one-day session, and they gave a lot of input themselves. And the session was run by myself and my colleague David Fletcher, and he ran a vineyard in Umbria in Italy for a number of years. He's a fountain of wealth when it comes to actually growing the thing. So that was great. So we ran these sessions, and we also developed and launched a kind of handbook at the same time, so that the trained trainers could take this back to their local teams and distribute them. And this kind of consisted of industry background, industry history, common pest and disease problems that we as an agency aren't concerned with, and then the quarantine pests and diseases, as well as inspection methodologies. And that kind of approach received quite a lot of good feedback. We also ran kind of open door sessions prior to the launch of the surveys. So this is, people could dial in. We went through all the disease, pest and disease in detail, and again, a bit of industry background, and went through the inspection methodology in detail and what was kind of expected of inspectors. We also developed a tool called the Host Pest Index, which runs on Microsoft Lists. And effectively, it kind of works like an app. Inspectors can load this up in the field on their phone, and it will tell them what symptoms they'll expect to see for different parts of the plant and different diseases. For the vineyard survey, it's quite straightforward. There's only one host, Vitis vinifera, but for the surveys, when there's a lot of different hosts, it will allow you to search the host, and it'll bring up the list of pests and diseases that you might expect to see or that we're concerned with, and where to look on the plant form and what it looks like and that sort of thing. And of course, we created nice, SOPs, that sort of thing. And we created a template letter to trade, so the inspectors had something to kind of, there's unity in our messaging to the trade when we were making initial contact. So a lot of people came together to make this survey possible. So I've just got a list here. I'll just go through them quickly. So the Food Standards Agency provided the data of all the vineyards. WineGB, we'll come on to those in just a sec. They're a big trade body. We've been working pretty extensively with them. DEFRA Policy, they kind of commission the work, and we work with them and all the devolved authorities to make sure we have a kind of joined up approach to our surveillance. DEFRA Science, they've given a lot of detail in pest-specific detail, and consulted on SOPs and general guidance. VeriScience are the labs, obviously deal with the diagnostics. We made sure all the diagnostics were in place with each pest and disease, because some of them were new to the lab as well. AFA Comms, again, working with industry. AFA Inspectors, but without them, obviously the work wouldn't be possible. AFA Imports, we try and work with them to kind of get a joined up approach throughout the surveillance journey, and the National Biosecurity Network, which used the Vineyard Survey as a case study for their biosecurity project, which aimed to join up surveillance across government. So that was quite an interesting thing to be involved with. So trade engagement, I think this has been one of the most crucial parts of what we've been doing here, and we've had really good buy-in from trade. So viticulture as an industry is very unique obviously it's an agricultural industry that's in its infancy. Not many agricultural industries really can say that, and effectively we're on the ground floor, and we have a real opportunity to help develop and influence the industry and the culture towards sustainable and biosecure practices. And so YNGB, as the biggest trade body, have been really proactive in helping us to do that. So they're giving us a platform. They've got monthly newsletters, which we kind of have free and open access to put information in there, and we've got a few collaborative projects. But they so willingly endorse our survey to their members that our inspectors have been met with very little abrasion on site by the individual vineyard owners, which has been really good. And so for our collaborative efforts so far, we've managed to produce this poster, which is about good biosecurity practices and Xylella fastidiosa. And down the line, we're working to develop a kind of a crop walker's guide in collaboration with them, which will be co-branded, which all their hopefully members will have, and it will go onto their website, which will give us a bit of a presence on the industry's largest kind of digital platform. So that's going to be something to look forward to. I'll just whiz through this page because I'm running out of time. And the next steps are to kind of continue building that relationship with trade and implement kind of the risk-based surveillance that we talked about earlier in the presentation. So